I enjoy many different genres of games, from platformers to RPGs, and the occasional session of Bible Black, but the one genre I spent more time on as a kid more than any other was the real-time strategy. There's just something so appealing about being able to construct an army and destroy the opposing force. It might have something to do with being picked on as a kid in school and living out my fantasies of blowing everyone up and ruling the world, and the first one I played, and the one I spent the most amount of time on, was Dune II, and we're not going to play it until we win. See, that's the thing about RTSs. Once I tell you how to get through each map, you'll be able to beat it on your own without so much as a second thought. Well, there's that and the fact that this game is split up into 3 different campaigns, making it nearly impossible for me to give you the complete walkthrough on how to beat this game. So, instead, I'm going to explain to you the mechanics of the game and give you tips you need to play until you win. Dune II is often mistaken as being the first real-time strategy game. In truth, Herzog's Zwei for the Mega Drive preceded it. However, Dune II refined and popularized the format. Originally released for DOS in 1992, Dune II achieved a lot of firsts. Support for the then-new General MIDI format, mouse-operated units and buildings, choose the next mission based on a world map, resource gathering in order to produce more units, simple base and unit construction, rudimentary technology tree based on available units and buildings already built, mobile units that can be turned into buildings, different playable factions, complete destruction of the enemy as your goal. In other words, while Herzog's Zwei was the first, and XCOM is often more fondly remembered, Dune 2 is the game from which almost every other modern RTS can trace its roots back to. It's also the first game that caused me to lose an entire summer vacation to the warm glow of an old CRT monitor. Of course, much like the Oakland Raiders, this game isn't without its share of problems. First off is the low, and I mean very low, unit limit. You're limited to 25 active units at any time. This is a combination of soldiers and vehicles, and is obviously a very large hurdle you have to cross. You also have a low limit to the number of structures you can build, 75. This may not seem like a problem, but in later levels, you'll run up to this limit fairly often, especially as you build out your mobile construction yards. The AI in the game is pretty weak, well, dumb. It was good for its time, but its flaws really stand out nowadays. The amount of spice, the resources you collect to build units, is very limited, and once it's gone forever. If a map ever comes down to the point where you have 0 spice, the computer will pretty much always win. The game speed affects how some units act. For example, on the slowest speed, the Atreides Sonic Tank fires only a short distance, while on the fastest speed, they're almost invincible with their extended range. The story in this game is, well, rather lackluster. Let's be honest, the Atreides and the Harkonnen are polar opposites of each other and offer 2 unique playstyles. Of course, the Atreides are the goody two-shoes, and the Harkonnen are pure evil. There's a third house that didn't exist in the Dune universe until this game, the Ordos, and they're almost as evil as the Harkonnen, but they're just greedy, not murderous. So, as you can tell, if you want to be the good guy, you're pretty much limited to playing the Atreides. The Ordos and the Harkonnen are pretty much everything you hate about humanity. Limitations and story aside, this is still a really fun game that offers 3 unique styles of play. The Atreides are well-rounded and focus on group efforts to achieve their goals. The Harkonnen rely on brute strength to overpower their opponents, and the Ordos rely on speed and manipulation to achieve their end goals. As an RTS, there are a ton of different units and structures, and they all do different things. The Harvester is the big, slow, defenseless unit that would otherwise prove to be completely useless if it wasn't the only way to harvest spice. The MCV, Mobile Construction Vehicle, clever name there, allows you to build an additional remote construction yard. It's slow, but you absolutely must use these in the later levels if you even want to have a chance of survival. The Carryalls and Ornithopters are the only airborne units in Dune 2. The Carryalls do exactly what you think they do. They carry big things around. The Ornithopters are offensive vehicles used by the Atreides and the Ordos. You don't control them, but they're nice additions to have. The soldiers are your basic units that shoot little pea shooters and, well, they're almost entirely useless. You see, the manual states that you can group these guys together by holding down the shift key and moving a unit to an adjacent soldier. The only problem is that this doesn't work, so the soldiers are completely useless. And believe me, having one little soldier standing around taking up space is quite possibly the most useless thing in this game. Seriously, the only thing these guys do is take up space and die. The heavy soldier is just about as useless as the regular soldier, unless you're in a position to stick them on mountains. Then they can dish out some serious damage with their rocket launchers to various vehicles. Otherwise, the only thing they're good for is unveiling terrain and getting killed. The Trike is a small, quick vehicle that's good for two things: unveiling terrain and getting blown up. The Atreides can build these guys from their light vehicle factory, while the Harkonnen can't build them at all. The Ordos get a special version of the Trike that is much faster than any unit on the battlefield, but has less armor. In other words, the Ordos get an even more useless trinket that you'll never use ever. The Quad is the much more heavily armored four-wheeled version of the Trike, and all of the houses get it. While it sacrifices speed for firepower and armor, it's a very worthy upgrade from its little brother and will carry you through several battles before becoming obsolete later in the campaign. The medium battle tank replaces the Quad as your main offensive vehicle by about map 4. It's slower than the Quad and can take some large bullet damage, but its firepower makes it an impressive offensive vehicle to have. Once you grow tired of the battle tank, you'll get access to the rocket launcher, and my god, is it glorious. Stick 3 rocket launchers behind a line of battle tanks, and you'll make your enemies regret pissing you off. The next step up is the main battle tank. This bad boy is even slower than the medium battle tank, but it carries one hell of a wallop. In addition to the basic units, there are several special units that you should be aware of. They're all the X factors in this otherwise very predictable game. The Sandworm is the creature of Dune that will make you pull out your hair even if you're the Atreides. Essentially, when you're on sand, you're not safe. The Sandworm will eat your units and not so much as say thank you for the nice meal, Mr. Player. Rude. The Fremen are, at first, a neutral unit that will occasionally cause you grief, but later on in the game they'll actually become a special unit for the Atreides. Fremen have the ability to turn invisible and sneak by enemy defenses. As a unit, they eat into your 25 unit limit. As soldiers, they can be crushed by treaded vehicles, and they do minimal damage. In other words, they might be the most useless special unit in the game. The Sonic Tank is the Atreides' special vehicle. It's very useful for killing soldiers and blowing up tanks, but its usefulness is limited based on the speed of the game. The slower the game, the less useful the tank gets, as its range becomes extremely limited, but setting the game faster makes them almost unstoppable. The Devastator is an Ordos special tank. It doesn't do much damage, but its warheads have a neural agent in them that temporarily causes units to change sides. The usefulness of this tank is pretty limited to specific situations, but when used correctly, it can be a devastating option. The Raider is the special Ordos Trike. As I said, it's much faster than the ordinary Trike, but lacks any real defense. The Saboteur is the game changer for the Ordos. This is the special soldier that can destroy any building or vehicle at the expense of itself. If you're able to sneak your Saboteur into the enemy base, you can do some serious damage. The Devastator is the special Harkonnen tank. It's slower than the heavy battle tank, more heavily armored, and more dangerous. It carries one hell of an attack with its dual 190mm guns, but it comes at a price. If the tank is destroyed, it explodes, killing units around it. The Death Hand missile is a nuclear missile and a potential game changer for the Harkonnen. It's very inaccurate, but when it hits its target, it is devastating. Hey, it's a nuclear missile. What did you expect? The Saboteur are the Emperor's elite troops. You'll never be able to control these guys directly, but that doesn't make them any less dangerous. A group of Saboteur can take out a light or medium vehicle and cause major damage to a treaded vehicle. Okay, aside from units you control, there are a ton of buildings you have to build and a technology tree to follow. The construction yard is the lifeblood of Dune II. If you lose your construction yard, you lose the game. Without one, you can't build any new buildings, so it's likely the first building you're going to try to destroy to keep the computer from repairing its lost buildings. The concrete slab is utterly worthless and just wastes time. While it's true that buildings sustain less damage when built on them, it's not statistically different enough to matter. Really, all they do is eat up credits and waste your time. The defensive wall is somewhat useful. On one hand, it'll keep other units out of your compound, but on the other hand, you have to build it on concrete because you can't repair it. The good thing about the defensive wall in this game is that it does serve a strategic purpose, thanks to the bad AI. The wind trap is your power plant, and you must keep an eye on the amount of energy you're spending in this game. They don't take long to build, but losing power means that you can't see your radar or build some units. The refinery converts raw spice into refined spice, giving you credits. Usually you can keep 1 or 2 of these around. Each refinery holds 1,000 credits. The storehouse is your cheap alternative to the refinery. Each silo holds 1,000 units of spice. The outpost is your radar structure. As long as it's above half health and is powered, it'll provide you with the all-knowing map, showing you unit positions and uncovered map locations. The turret and the rocket turret will play a significant role in your defenses. The regular turret will usually take care of any soldiers and light vehicles that come into its range, and will contribute to damage for the heavier vehicles, but it can't handle them on its own. The rocket turrets are good for taking care of heavier units as well as protecting your base from ornithopters, although they're a bit less effective against soldiers and light vehicles. The barracks produce soldiers. Soldiers are worthless. Barracks are worthless. The only reason you ever build a barrack is to unlock part of your technology tree. The WOR facility builds heavy troopers. Again, like the units it produces, it's almost entirely worthless, except to unlock your technology tree. The light factory will produce light vehicles such as the Trike and the Quad, and will be your offensive lifeblood for the first few maps of the game. The heavy factory will, of course, carry you through the rest of the game. It'll produce your heavy vehicles and mobile construction yards. The high-tech factory produces the flying units. It's not a very useful building to have, but you need it to unlock your tech tree. The repair facility is a pretty good building to have. Not only does it help you unlock other buildings, but you can repair damaged vehicles, which is faster and costs less than building new ones. The IX Research Center doesn't produce anything, but it does unlock more of your technology tree and allows you to build the house-specific weapons. The Starport allows you to buy units from the Merchants Guild at a higher price than what it costs to build them. The upside of this, though, is that the purchases from the Starport do not count against your maximum vehicle count. Well, until the Merchants Guild sells out and you can't buy anymore. The palace serves no purpose other than allowing you to build your special house weapons, including the Fremen, Devastator, and Death Hand missiles, so this building is essential to have, obviously. So as you can see, for an early game, this one had a lot of interesting content. Unique units, buildings, and 3 campaign settings means that something must be lacking in this game. It is, after all, a DOS game that came on floppy disks, and the thing that it's missing is AI. The AI in this game pretty much amounts to rushing into you headfirst over and over again until the computer's supply of spice runs out. And really, this battle of Arrakis pretty much amounts to a war of attrition. However, with that in mind, there are some strategies you can employ that will work in your favor. Every battle goes roughly the same way. Build a power plant, build a refinery, build an outpost, and then go from there. For the first few maps, that'll work fine. However, you'll find yourself starved for credits, so a good strategy to employ is to always build a second refinery. This will give you additional storage for 1,000 credits, and give you a second harvester for faster harvesting. There's really no point in building a third refinery. You'll get to a point in later maps where you might feel the urge to build a third one, but you probably don't want to do that unless you destroy one of your older ones. Essentially, you'll be moving your refineries forward in the later maps. Alright, you've got money, you've got power, and you've got radar. The next step is to build up your army as fast as possible. The enemy is always on a timer in this game, and will eventually send out units to map out your base. Once it does this, you're on the clock because the computer will start to send in its attack waves. The bad news is that this usually happens right in the middle of the building process, so you'll usually be underprepared for the attacks. The good news is that the computer is dumb as shit and doesn't employ any tactics whatsoever. Once you figure out where the computer is attacking from, that's where it'll attack the entire time you're on the map. This is especially a problem on the final map, because when the final assault is triggered, the computer will send waves of enemies for 20 straight minutes. And if you're on fast mode, the number of enemies you're expected to survive through is just insane. Of course, the final map is a real bitch and a half. If you play as either the Atreides or Ordos, you're expected to survive through 3 waves of Death Hand missiles. Now, at first, this might seem a bit unfair until you realize that while the Death Hand is quite possibly the most destructive force in the game, it's also the most inaccurate weapon to ever exist outside of Rhett Bomar's arm.
Bomar made cameo! Bomar computer smart.
Seriously, the Harkonnen don't use laser, radar, or satellite guidance systems. They simply lob a nuclear warhead into the air and hope it hits something. If you're playing as the Harkonnen, then there's nothing you can do besides attack with the missile and hope it hits something. If you're defending against it, you do have three options. First, pray to God that it doesn't hit anything. Second, build as far away from the main construction yard as physically possible. Third, build a heavy vehicle factory as fast as possible and build an MCV. Move your MCV away from the main construction site, preferably on a piece of uninhabited rock, and use that as your main construction site. While a combination of the second and third methods is generally the smart thing to do, you need to keep in mind that it's also somewhat of a cheat. Remember when I said that the AI is dumb as shit in this game? Yeah, the computer is so dumb that it will continue to attempt to attack your main base, with Death Hand missiles no less, even after the original base has been destroyed. Seriously, you can build a secondary base behind enemy lines and these guys will never clue in and wonder why they keep getting attacked from the flank. Now, you might think this is a cheap tactic, but really, it's almost the only way you can win. Well, it's not the only way you can win, it's just the easiest. There is one more tactic you can use, and basically, it's advancing the front. You start off with a small defensive front. Use that to defend your base from the initial wave of attackers, and then move your defensive front forward, bringing in a small group of vehicles behind them to pick off anyone that might make it past. Keep this strategy up until the front is, essentially, at the enemy's doorstep. Use this to your advantage. Build a construction yard near their base, build vehicle factories next to their base, and flood them with a nearly unstoppable wave of attackers. Now, this strategy is difficult to pull off. First off, you'll be under constant siege by the enemy. The second problem is that the lack of any alternative base means that if you get nailed by a Death Hand missile, you're screwed. Your best option for beating this game, though, is to build, defend, seek, and destroy. Of course, once you go through all of that and you master this game, you're presented with this wonderful ending.